sitting here with my friend and business partner, Jarvis Coffin, who is the CEO of Burst Media. What in 2010 does Burst Media plan to do in terms of changing the industry? What is one of the one or two things you guys are rolling out this year?
Well, I think we're very comfortable with our business model of representing long-tail websites principally. Mm-hmm. You know, Rob, we've always been knee-deep in the long tail of the internet, vertical niche, independent web publishers. And we have three businesses that support them. Our legacy business, The Network, which sells premium high-value advertising for them. The Burst Direct business, which is the performance advertising side of our business, and then our engineering side of our business, where we license the technology to other people that are trying to build ad networks. Again, you know, putting to work our experience in attracting and managing networks. If you listen to what's going on here at the IAB conference, it's about scale, it's about audiences, it's about exploiting, you know, ever greater portions of the internet. And we have been out there in deep space for a long time. We know as much about, you know, the vast reaches of the internet as anybody, as opposed to your sort of old portals and bulge bracket websites. Accordingly, you know, it's a busy place at Burst Media today as people look to either on a site-specific basis or an audience basis monetize ever greater portions of the internet environment.
Sure. Dave Moore last night made some comments about us getting more aggressive as advertisers, getting more in the user experience phases, disruptive. It's our right, they have the audience, we have the right to cause a little disruption. What do you think about that comment?
Well, I think there's a middle ground. I think Dave, as chairman of the IAB, was doing his job to, you know, incentivize or to motivate the industry to action, to think, you know, ambitiously and aggressively about the important role that advertising has to play in the digital space, and he's absolutely right about that. We can't get past the fact, however, that it is a consumer-driven world. Marketers have been coming to terms with that for as long as I've been in the business, which is nearly 30 years. I mean, you know, there is no just one version of Coca-Cola anymore. There are many versions of Coca-Cola catering to consumer-driven interests. You know, it's a niche world out there. So media is not, unfortunately, excused or invulnerable to this. The new media marketplace is, you know, is a consumer-driven marketplace, and we're going to have to find common ground with consumers if we want them to embrace our ad messages. The internet, I think, offers lots of ways to do that. I think we can be intrusive without being obnoxious. And I would say, to the point probably a little bit of this conversation, creative has to emerge, and Dave talked about that, and before him, Randall Rothenberg talked about it a lot. Creative has to emerge as a priority for the internet in 2010, because if you're going to be intrusive, then you better be good. You know, if you're going to interrupt the consumer's experience, as Dave Moore advocates that we do online, then you got to trade them, as Jerry Delafamina used to say, with value. It's got to be interesting, it's got to be funny, it's got to be compelling. So it's not just as simple as throwing up a bunch of ads and saying, take this, you know, you're going to like it. Because if they don't like it, they're not going to take it. And there's nothing we can change about the facts of the consumer-driven world in which we live today.
So Jarvis, your point is not to be obnoxious, to be aggressive, but be borderline, not to be obnoxious. But at the same time, how do you think targeting fits into all that? How do you think that, can you be more obnoxious if you target?
Can you be more obnoxious if you target? Well, I mean, the answer is no. You can't be obnoxious and be successful as a marketer. Not if you want people to use your products and service. Not if you have a brand that you're trying to protect. Mm-hmm. If you target properly, however, you are halfway there, right? Dave talked about, you know, how did he put it last night in rather matter-of-fact terms? Tampons versus what? Jock itch or something to that effect. I don't see any tampon ads today. I don't see them on television unless I'm watching the wrong day parts. I don't see them in the magazines I subscribe to. The media industry already knows how to break down audiences around those kinds of terms. The question is, how can those people that are marketing certain products reach their best, most important, reach women to continue with the analogy that Dave meant, how to reach women at different lifestyles and different life stages. Because that business, as anyone will tell you in the personal care products business, it's not one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, and that is the opportunity that exists for people online. And so to take the targeting idea, you can come online and you can break everything down into its constituent parts. And at Burst, of course, we believe that should begin and essentially begin with not just the right target, but the right place. If you get the right target and you get the right place and you put that message in context, you're 3/4 of the way there to creating a satisfactory consumer experience with advertising. The last bit has to be a strong creative message.
That's great. It's a great point. So actually, it's a good lead into the next question.
Okay.
Because using that as a backdrop, the types of ads that we're going to show and the type of targeting that we're going to have, who do you think is the winner in the next evolution of ad network? And I'll get a little more specific with my question. The older traditional ad network, the ones who are probably the most prevalent today, were really service businesses. We service our advertisers, we service our publishers mostly. Then there's an in-between group that has service and technology add-ons. And then there's groups that are coming around, call them demand-side platforms, supply-side platforms. They're almost purely technology-based. So who is the winner in this game? Is it A, B, C, or another D?
I don't know who's the winner. Ultimately, the winner's going to be the end user in the media business. And in our business, we're still working towards that outcome. Personally, I think a great deal of what you see going on in the network space today is about the money, not the media. I think a lot of what you see going on the demand side is about the money, not the media. Let's face it, what networks have done is, what they are at a minimum is an efficient way to gain reach online. And that can be you can regard that as a technology solution or whatever. And I think an awful lot of what's taking place with regards to audience targeting is fundamentally about, how can we use the internet affordably? Ad agencies, I think, are tired of watching other people get rich on those kinds of efficiency imperatives. And they've decided they can do some of that for themselves. God knows they've been poor long enough. I think, indeed, that one of the most vital questions that needs to get talked about, and the 4A's meeting is coming up after this one, I think, next week in San Francisco, is agency compensation. And for as long as the agencies are being made to work for dismal wages, then the networks are going to emerge to them as an attractive way, an affordable way to make money. And they desperately need to find ways to do that and buy advertising online efficiently, because that's where all the people are. But at the end of the day, is it about the media or is it about the money? And a lot of the arguments around here are, in my view, cover for the fact that, agencies are needing to figure out ways to buy the new media affordably and efficiently, and that's the driver.
Tolman Jeffs today did a presentation about how $5 CPM from the customer turns into $1 CPM to the publisher, and all the different hands in the middle of the pie. So my answer to the question of who the ultimate winner is I think that networks need to get better at embracing some of these technology pieces so they can offer it to their customers while still being able to deliver a good majority of that money to the publisher. Because ultimately, with too many hands being in the middle, it causes a problem in the ecosystem, which we can fix. What do you think about that?
I think that I think we're so I agree with that in principle broadly. When I talk about the end users, the winner ultimately in this, or needs to be the winner, that to me means the publisher. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Burst has always had the publisher. When we think of customers, we think of publishers. And you're right. If you look at the value chain that Tolman put up on the board today, by the time the money gets to the publisher, it's been cut so many times and stepped on, as to use the vernacular, so many times in the marketplace that it's just nickels and dimes that are coming out at that end. That will have to correct. That can't stand. I mean, you know, the publishers are the primary caregivers of the end user. They're the ones that are responsible for that experience. They control the supply. And so what I think will happen is that they will, on their own, you know, as a function of how marketplaces work, figure out how to squeeze out all of the different handlers in the middle. So you're saying the same thing. Networks or publisher providers are going to have to figure out how to account for, take control of more of those steps. So there aren't so many hands in the cookie jar, so to speak. But I'll add something to that. Not only will that happen, but publishers will start to insist on fewer and fewer network, you know, in the process of that, what you're talking about is fewer and fewer network relationships. You're talking, in fact, about exclusive relationships. And that is good for everybody, because that means the publisher doesn't have as many people with their hands in the jar on the money that's traveling to migrating to their site. It also means advertisers will be will be able to discern differentiated sales products in the marketplace. One network or one ad seller going into an ad agency with a host of websites that are only available through that vendor. Right now, you know, you've got all of this conversation about audience targeting going on, and the presumption that's being made with all of that is everyone can play in the pool, relying on everybody's inventory evenly. That's just not going to happen. That's just not going to survive long term, in my opinion.
So I would adjust what you said. I would agree with some of it, but I would definitely disagree with exclusive. Mm-hmm. I would agree with less players. I think the industry needs less players. Publishers have way too many options, and it ultimately dilutes their decision-making process because they're getting their doors knocked on constantly. But exclusivity, I wouldn't go that far. I think that a free marketplace ultimately exists with competition. You need to allow competitions on both ends, on the publisher side and the advertiser side, and if you move to exclusivity, I think you would lose some of that competition. So,
excellent. Let the game begin.
That's right. Okay. So with that said, thank you, Jarvis.
My pleasure. That was fun. Good.